Here's the paradox nobody wants to admit. The more you pride yourself on being a good guy who respects women, the less attractive you become. And I know this because I spent years being that guy, watching women choose men who didn't give a damn, while I stood there confused, holding my moral high ground like it was supposed to mean something. I've coached hundreds of men through this exact problem. The pattern is always the same. They come to me frustrated, confused, why everything they're doing is producing the wrong results. And within the first conversation, I can tell you exactly why they're faded. They're operating from the same broken framework you probably are right now. Now, to zoom out for a moment, before I figured this out, I was 100 pounds overweight and completely invisible to women. When I finally transformed and started getting attention, I made pretty much every mistake in the book. I gave away my power. I compromised my standards. I became desperate the moment a woman showed even the slightest interest. So I can tell you confidently that I've been on both sides. The guy with no options and the guy who finally understood how the game truly works. That's why I can see your blind spots before you even open your mouth. You think you have self respect. You think setting boundaries and having standards makes you high value. But here's what's actually happening. The moment a woman shows you the slightest bit of interest, you abandon everything you claim to stand for. You become a different person, and she can smell that desperation from a mile away. The conventional advice tells you to be yourself, to be nice and sociable, to respect women, and the right one would come along. But here's what they don't tell you. This only works if you're already the kind of man women actually find attractive. And if you're watching this video, you're probably not there yet. Now, before you click away thinking this is about bending reality or just being an asshole, that's not what this is about. In fact, that defensive reaction, that's exactly the problem I'm going to talk about. You're so invested in being seen as a good guy that you can't even hear the truth without your ego screaming at you. Here's what this video will do for you. I'm going to show you the 5 levels of thinking that separate men who attract quality women from men who repel them. And each level is going to challenge something you currently believe about yourself. Not because I want to make you feel like shit, but because your identity that you're clinging to is the exact thing preventing you from actually getting what you want. By the end, you'll understand why your self respect is simply performative, why your standards are fake, and why the very virtue you think is making you attractive is your biggest liability. Let's get into it. Scarcity thinking in dating looks something like this. You believe that giving women your time, attention, and validation for free will make them value you more. You think that being accommodating demonstrates your worth. You convince yourself that lowering your standards shows you're not actually shallow. Smart people fall into this trap because it sounds logical. If I show her how much I care, she'll see I'm different from the other guys. But the problem is, you're not operating from care. You're operating from need, and women can feel the difference immediately. Here's what it looks like in action. You meet a woman you're attracted to, and instantly you shift into performance mode. You become hyper responsive. Every conversation revolves around her interests. You suggest getting together, but you phrase it as a kind of free whenever type of vibe to avoid seeming too forward. When she does agree, you bend your entire week around her availability. The whole time you're convinced you're showing thoughtfulness, showing her you're different. But what you're actually broadcasting is that you have nothing else going on for you, that you're thrilled just to have her attention, that your time is basically worthless. Abundance is understanding that attraction has no morality attached to it. Being nice doesn't make you attractive. Being accommodating doesn't create desire. The qualities women say they want in a man, kindness, vulnerability, emotional availability, those are only relevant after you've already created attraction. They're like dessert. They're not the main course. David Data put it perfectly in his book, The Way of the Superior Man. The feminine is attracted to the masculine's direction and depth of presence, not to his capacity to please and accommodate. You can be the nicest guy in the world, but if you're operating from neediness, none of this really matters. A highly valuable man doesn't give his time and attention away for free because he understands those things are actually valuable. He doesn't lower his standards because he knows he has options. And most importantly, he doesn't need a woman to validate his worth because he already knows what he brings to the table. But let's be honest, most guys hear this and think they've got it all figured out. Okay, I'll just act more confident and set some boundaries. They try to implement the tactics without addressing the deeper issue, which brings us to level 1. Think of dating like a negotiation. The person who needs to deal less has basically all the power. The moment you reveal how badly you want it, you've already lost. Robert Greene writes also in his 48 Laws of Power. Make your accomplishments seem effortless. What is undervalued is inevitably seen as cheap. When you're too available, too eager, too accommodating, you're advertising your desperation. And I learned this the hard way when I first started dating. I had basically no idea we were all playing a game. And you can't decide not to play the game because that's also a strategy. I was completely taken in by the idea that you can finesse your way into the bedroom with good compliments and buying a few drinks. But all it really did was scream of desperation. I got rejected more when I tried to play nice because it made me timid and hesitant, paralyzed me on the spot and gave women the ick. And I kept doing it because I thought being a gentleman was just the right way to be. So level 1 is very simple. Have a higher regard for yourself and by extension the woman you're interacting with. Your time and attention are valuable. You should be treated as such. Stop cheapening your value by giving these things away for free in the hopes of securing sex or validation. This works because it forces you to act differently. You stop texting her immediately. You stop being available at her convenience. You stop planning your life around her schedule. And suddenly women start responding completely differently. They chase a little more. They invest a little more. They seem more interested. The psychological principle here is scarcity. When something seems less valuable, it becomes more desirable. By withdrawing your constant availability, you accidentally create the perception of value. But here's where it backfires. You start playing hard to get while still operating from the same desperate mindset. You wait 3 hours to text back, but you're actually staring at your phone the whole time. Or you act busy, but you cancel everything she asks you to. You have standards, but they're all negotiable the moment she signals a hint of interest. You're performing abundance while living in scarcity. The facade simply doesn't hold. The real issue isn't your tactics. It's that you're still making decisions from need rather than want. Which brings us to level 2, which is the mentality shift. Because here's the pattern most guys actually miss. You can have all the right standards and boundaries written down laid out for you. But the moment a woman shows genuine interest, you're going to forget everything. I know this very intimately. I spent years invisible to women, overweight, socially isolated. When I finally dropped 100 pounds and attention started pouring in, it was absolutely intoxicating. That feeling blinded me completely to my own standards. In those early days of dating and exploring my options, the temptation to abandon everything I claimed to believe really shined through. I would move too quickly out of enthusiasm. The urge to get closer to a woman and really get to know her became like a drug, and I didn't have the self-control or ambitious lifestyle to offset that temptation. So this is level 2. It's understanding that having standards means nothing if you don't actually believe them. The issue isn't what you say your boundaries are. It's that you are still operating from scarcity, which means you come from a position of need, not want. A man who truly has options doesn't need to set boundaries. His boundaries are automatic because he knows he can walk away. He doesn't need to play it cool. He is cool because he genuinely doesn't need the outcome. The psychological insight here is internal versus external validation. Mark mentioned this as well in this quote. He says, neediness is when you place a higher priority on others' perceptions of you than your own perception of yourself. When you need a woman's interest to feel valuable, you'll compromise everything to preserve that feeling. But when you are able to validate yourself, her interest becomes like a bonus, not like a necessity. This explains why men already in relationships attract more attention, because they're not trying to prove anything. They're not performing. They just exist. And that authenticity is purely magnetic. But even when you develop genuine self-validation, there's an even deeper trap. The question becomes, why did you need to learn this? What created the scarcity mentality to begin with? And that's level 3, which is this pattern of scarcity destroying value shows up everywhere, not just dating. If you're job hunting while desperate, your interviews reek of need. You accept lowball offers because you're grateful someone said yes. Business negotiations when you're broke, you have no leverage, and everyone knows it. If you form friendships when you're lonely, you attract other lonely people, not the caliber of men who will elevate you. The same could be said about fitness. The guy who desperately needs to transform his body, he quits when results don't come fast enough because he's chasing validation. He's not building a life. And I'll be honest with you, my best results in business, relationships, everything came when I stopped caring about outcomes. When you realize that grip, you can actually be present and truly enjoy the process. So here's when I finally saw it. Chasing a business client, doing everything right, being responsive, accommodating, eager, but they dragged it out. Then I landed another client and stopped caring. 2 days later, the first one actually made the commitment. The moment I didn't need them, I became instantly more valuable. Scarcity is a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you need something desperate, you're going to repel it. If you chase an outcome, you start to behave in ways that prevent it. So the unified principle is simple. You can't discuss desire or value. You either have it or you don't. Trying to convince someone of your worth proves you don't believe in it yourself. Nassim Taleb writes in his book Anti-Fragile as well. You are free in proportion to the amount of options you have. The man with genuine options doesn't negotiate because he doesn't have to. His abundance is his power, is his leverage. Most people miss this deeper point because they think this is about tactics or mindset. I'll just work on myself and build up my confidence. They're asking the wrong question. So here's what almost everyone misses. Why did you need to learn this at all? So here's what almost everyone misses. Why did you need to learn this at all? A naturally confident man doesn't need self-validation strategies. A man with genuine abundance doesn't remind himself not to be desperate. If you're here learning this, something must have created the scarcity mentality, right? Usually, it's early invisibility, like being unattractive or socially awkward or overweight or just a late boomer. Somewhere along the line, though, you learned that female attention was rare and precious, something to be grateful for, not selective about. And the cruel irony about this, scarcity taught you to overvalue any interest. So even after you transformed, maybe you lost weight, built your own career, developed skill sets, you carried that programming forward. So you got access to the game, but still playing desperate. You see this constantly. Guys who are attractive, who've transformed their bodies, build their careers, got matches and dates, they still act like the invisible teenager that they were. Still grateful just to be in the room. Still compromising because they don't believe that attention will last. The strategies work, having standards, operating from abundance, self-validation, but they work best when you don't really need them, when they're authentic and not performed. So the deeper truth here is that you think the problem is lacking self-respect. Actually, you're too invested in appearing to have self-respect, so concerned with being seen as a good guy who respects women, that you've made it your entire identity. That identity is the problem, because real self-respect isn't performed or announced. It's none of that. It's simply knowing your worth so deeply, you don't need external validation to confirm. The men who truly understand this respect themselves without needing to broadcast it. They make decisions from a place of automatism, no compromise because there's nothing to compromise. They know what they want and they don't settle. And you probably think you're that man, but you're not because you're performing him while hoping a woman validates that performance. And to close off, I know what you're thinking. This sounds like being an asshole. I don't want to become someone I'm not. But that exact reaction is a symptom because you're so invested in being perceived as that guy that you can't even consider truth without your ego defending itself. You already are someone you're not. You're already performing, pretending to be nice when you're just scared of rejection or failure, claiming to respect women when you're trying to manipulate them through niceness and accommodation. What I'm offering here is not becoming someone else. It's becoming who you actually are underneath the performance. A man who knows his worth, who can validate him, who can choose deliberately and not desperately. That old identity that I'm a good guy who deserves love for being nice has to just die away because it's keeping you stuck, giving yourself away for free, wondering why nobody wants anything to do with you or values you. The new identity is simple. I'm a high-value man who creates his own validation and chooses women who meet my standards, not women who simply show me attention. If you embody that genuinely, not as a performing, everything changes. The woman you want starts wanting you because you're finally someone worth wanting. Anyways, my friends, that's all for today. If you've enjoyed this and have any questions, please leave them down below. I would be very curious to hear your thoughts. And as always, if you want to work with me directly, you can click the first link in my bio, and I'll catch you all in the next video. Take care.